Okay, so now I'm in the eighth grade. I'm at Harvard Westlake. Harvard Westlake's one of the best schools in the country in terms of academics. They say to get into Harvard Westlake, it's harder to get into Harvard Westlake than it is to get into any college, and it's a lot of money to go to that school. And I got into that school because I got straight A's number one. I was always considered an excellent student, and teachers always loved me. I was always a teacher's pet, and also I was considered one of the best basketball players in the country. So I got into one of the best schools in the country at that time. And when I look at it now, I went to UC San Diego and I studied under Dr. Ramachandran. I took a psychology class with him, and he talked about how there's people who have what's called synesthesia, and he said that those people tend to be the best at metaphorical thinking, and they tend to be the biggest geniuses in history. All had synesthesia, where you have cross modalities of your senses. So, for instance, you can see sounds, or you can hear, or like you can taste things that you hear. That's what synesthesia is, and I have that for seeing numbers and for seeing names. Like I can see the color of people's names, I can see the color of numbers and stuff like that. So when I look at it now, and they say that those people who have that tend to have more intelligence in terms of like metaphorical thinking and making connections and stuff like that. I think that it might be one of the things. And also, I know now my personality type. I tend to be more of a cerebral type of person. I'm an INTP and a 5W4. I'm a philosophical type of person and very academically oriented, and more like I'm very mental with my stuff. So it makes sense to me now, looking back at it, that I did go to a big high school for academics. But I'm at Harvard Westlake, and it's not just a good school for academics, but also for basketball. And at that time, they had one of the best basketball teams in the country too, or not in the country, but in the state. And I'm in the eighth grade at that point. So at that point, I'm doing really well. I'm scoring 30, 40 points a game. But like I said, I have the shoot away machine in my backyard. And at the same time, I'm shooting overhead. And I know, looking back at it, because I look at videos, I started shooting different because I'm picking the ball off of a rack. I'm not going to go into details, but all I know is I can show specifics of how when I was younger, how I would move into shots. And I can show you how great players move into shots and why I shot sideways. It was because how I moved into shots. Now, picking the ball off a rack, I could not move into shots correctly. And when I look at the videos of me after the shooting machine, I would pick the ball. I would be in the game and I would catch the ball and move into it just like I would practice, like I was picking the ball off a rack, moving straight forward or hopping straight forward, just like I was picking the ball off a rack, which no good player would do. And I'm not going to go into too much details, but just one thing I would start to do was I started shooting my left leg in front of my right. But that's because of how I was moving into my shots, picking the ball off of the rack. Now, at the time, my dad, it wasn't so serious because, like I said, I was considered one of the best basketball players in the country. And even then, I'm scoring 30, 40 points a game, even though I'm not shooting well like I used to. But I'm still scoring 30, 40 points a game. So it's not so big of a deal. My dad's still happy with how I'm playing, kind of. But things were not going so great. And I remember that this started happening at the same exact time that my dad got the shooting machine. Now, I mentioned before, people think, no, it wasn't a shooting machine like Pat Barrett, the coach for SCA, one of the biggest coaches in the country. He coached a lot of NBA players. He's considered one of the biggest scouts. He talked to me in 2019 when I was playing with Compton College, and he was telling me, oh yeah, ever since that golf cart accident, you weren't the same. But he doesn't know that it wasn't the golf cart accident. It was that the same exact time I got of the golf cart accident, that was when my dad got the shoot away machine. So this is the eighth grade. I'm still scoring 30, 40 points a game, doing big stuff. But there's problems. My shot's a little bit messed up. And I remember seventh grade. This is when my dad got the shooting machine. My dad and I were fighting. My dad was saying, Ryan, why aren't you shooting sideways? Because remember, my dad, that's why I was such a good shooter. My dad told me, shoot sideways. Don't shoot like coaches tell you to shoot. That's what gave me the edge, because I was shooting sideways. But then my dad was like, Ryan, why aren't you shooting sideways? Shoot like you should shoot. Now, a big reason, now I know the reason why I shot sideways is how I moved into shots. But picking the ball off of a rack, I wasn't able to move into my shots in a way that would make me go sideways. But I didn't know that at the time because I was unconscious. So I'm just picking the ball off a rack and I'm shooting. I'm like, Dad, I don't think. That's why I was such a good shooter. I was unconscious of what I did. I didn't think. So I'm like, Dad, just let me shoot. I'm just picking the ball off a rack and I'm shooting. I'm just letting me shoot. I don't want to think about it. So my dad's like, well, you're not shooting right. You're not shooting sideways. So we started getting in arguments at this point. And he didn't know it was a shooting machine. I didn't know it at the time. But I remember it was getting intense, and it was getting to the point where we started yelling at each other. This was in the 7th grade. And at one point, it got so bad, I screamed. I remember he was mad at me for not shooting sideways, and I just screamed because I was so frustrated. And I remember after I screamed, I threw up. And my dad was like, well, you threw up because you popped the blood vessel in your brain, and now you're probably going to die tomorrow or something. Like, he tried to scare me. And then that was like the day before my first day at Harvard Westlake, I remember. And I remember like that whole night I was afraid I was going to die. But so my point is, problems were starting to occur. And I know it was at the same time I got the shooting machine. And I know it was because and my dad was saying it's because you're not shooting sideways. This is the problem. But now I know the reason I wasn't shooting sideways was because of how I was picking the ball off of the rack, and how when you pick the ball off a rack, you can't move into shots in a way that will make you sideways. The rack, first off, intrudes it. Second off, the reason I shot sideways was how I moved into shots. And you can't do that when you're picking the ball off a rack. Now, when I look at videos of that time, when I picked the ball off of when I'd be shooting in the games, I would shoot just like I would practice. Like I was picking the ball off a rack, and it made me shoot square and in a way that great shooters don't shoot. And I even shot, so I'm not going to get into details about that because I don't want to make people think too much about their shot. And I know, and a part of that is because I know that I was such a great shooter because I didn't think about my shot. All I knew was I was shooting sideways. That's all I'm going to say. But I'm not even going to go into details of what that exactly means. So, but at this point, it took me a long time to even figure out like how great shooters shoot. And even now, I wish I had more videos so I can study more what I did. Because I know when I get videos and I look at what I did, I can mimic it. And the more videos I get, the more I understand, the more I can see what great shooters do. But I don't have very many videos. And I'll get to that at some point later. But so at this point, there's a problem with my shot. My dad and I are starting to have a little bit of problems. But again, I'm doing very well. I'm scoring 30, 40 points a game. I remember one of the games we were playing against Brentwood, this Harvard Westlake versus Brentwood. And I think I scored 40 points that game, maybe 41 points. And the coaches for the varsity team came to the game. And we had like Bryce Taylor played in the NBA, and he came to the game. He was on the high school team. He was on the varsity team at the time. I didn't play with him because he graduated that year, but he came to the game, and all the dudes on the varsity team came to the game to watch us play. And I had 41 points that game. But I remember I was shooting terrible. And that's the thing is, I think it's funny because I was talking to my friend Nick about it, Nick Tolson, who I went to Harvard Westlake with, and he was like, dude, he was like, yeah, you were scoring like 40 points a game, like you were amazing at that time. And I was like, yeah, but I know it's hard to believe, but if it wasn't for the shooting machine, I probably would have been scoring 60, 70, because people don't understand that I really was considered the best basketball player in the country, and I really did start having problems, and I know it was because of the shooting machine. So my shots messed up. So I'm missing most of my shots. But I still scored 41 points. It's kind of hard to believe, but I know that I'm shooting weird. I'm shooting different, and I'm not shooting square. My dad knew that. And I remember after the game, my dad was really upset with me. Even though I scored 41 points, the coaches came to the game. But my dad was mad because he was like, and my mom said, and my mom went to the game too, and my mom was like, yeah, Ryan's not going to, you're not going to play varsity shooting like that. Like, you're not going to get on the varsity team shooting like that. Because my dad wanted me to play varsity as a freshman. And my dad was like, you can tell he was upset after the game. My mom was like, Paul, why are you upset? It's because Ryan didn't shoot well. And my dad was like, I don't remember, but he had that face like he was upset, and it was because I wasn't shooting well. And it was true, I wasn't shooting well, even though I scored 41 points. It turned out that the coaches were really impressed with that game. They were like, well, you scored 41 points, and that's part of the reason why I did play varsity as a freshman. And I was a starting point guard on varsity as a freshman, the only player in my school's history to start as a freshman. And very few players in my school's history ever even played as a freshman. I think it was before me, it was like a few, but no player had ever started, except I think it was the Collins twins who went to Harvard Westlake. I think that they might have started as freshmen, but nobody before that. I was the first player. But anyways, I ended up playing varsity as a freshman, but this game in the 8th grade, the varsity coaches came. I scored 41, but like I said, I'm shooting bad. I'm shooting terrible. And I know it's because I'm shooting overhead. So I think in my dad's mind, it was because I was shooting overhead. And he probably thought, yeah, that's the reason why. But I know, looking back at it, and I look at the videos, I was still unconscious. I know that if I wouldn't have been picking the ball off of a rack, I would have been aligning to what was perfect. Because I was still doing perfect. I was scoring 41 points. I was doing everything right. And I know that there was nothing wrong with me. And I know that my dad wants to believe that. And my mom probably wants to believe. Everybody wants to believe that. It was something with me. But I know that there was nothing wrong with me. I was still unconscious. And I know that I would have been aligning to what was right. But I know that it was because I was practicing wrong. I was practicing picking the ball off of the rack. And I know because I can look at the videos. And for just like one example is I would start shooting good stepping with my right leg and then my left leg. I never shot like that before. But that was because when I picked the ball off of the rack, on the left side of the rack, I would step on my right leg and then my left leg. And I know that doing it that way, I would shoot sideways because the rack wouldn't be protruding me. So in games, that's the way I would make most of my shots, stepping with my right leg then my left leg, because that would keep me sideways. But when I would step on my left leg, right leg, I would pick the ball off of the rack and the rack would be protruding me and I wouldn't be able to move into it correctly. And I would miss those shots because it was the rack. The rack really was the problem. And like I said, a lot of people are going to think like, well, if you're a great shooter, you'd be able to figure this stuff out and you would have been able to fix it. And no, the reason I was such a great shooter was because I didn't know what I was doing. So when my shot got messed up, I didn't know how to fix it because that was why I was a better shooter than everybody, because everybody else knows what they're doing. I didn't. And that's why I was so good. So now I'm still unconscious. I still would have been great, but I'm doing it wrong because of the way I'm practicing wrong. So I'm picking the ball off the rack, stepping incorrectly, making me shoot square. My dad's like, you should be shooting sideways. But I didn't really understand what that was. Now I'm shooting overhead at the same time. So then my dad, I'm not going to get into details, but at this point, it wasn't so bad to where things were going out of control with me and my dad. But there was conflict. There was problems. There was difficulties. Like my dad and I were getting in fights about my shot, but it wasn't so bad because I was still doing pretty decent. I'm still scoring 30, 40 points a game. It's not so horrible. Then the first games of varsity come where I'm going to be playing varsity. First, I played with P. Miller Ballers. That was Master P's basketball team. And I played, Malik was on the team, who was P. Diddy's bodyguard. And, DeMar DeRozan was on the team. And Brandon Jennings and the other dudes who played in the NBA were on that team. And we were the best team in the country. But I remember I went to the games and people were expecting me to be the best shooter because I was known for that growing up. But I remember I'm going to the games and I'm missing all my shots. And I think it was Silk the Shocker was at the game, and he was like one of the assistant coaches with Master P, and he told me he's like, Ryan, you need to get us some threes this game, because they wanted me to get some threes because Nickelodeon was following us. And I was the only white guy on the team. They probably wanted to get some like video of the white guy making some shots and stuff. But I wasn't making any shots. And I was, and that's what I'm known for. I was always known for being the best shooter. But now I'm not a good shooter anymore. So that's bad. I'm known as the best shooter in the country. Now I can't shoot. And I know why. Now, again, people are going to think, oh, it's because you're shooting overhead or because of no. It was because of the shooting machine. But anyway, so my shot's getting messed up. Playing with the P. Miller Ballers. But then I go to my first game with varsity at Harvard Westlake. And my dad didn't think I was going to be playing varsity. So he didn't even go to the first game with the P. Miller Ballers. Like I said, my whole life, my dad went to every one of my games. He was always supportive of everything. My dad loved me. And same thing with my mom. She would go to almost all my games. And my mom would be, she was there for me, right? But like at this point, remember, things started to go a little bit bad. And my mom was like, what's wrong with your shot? But it wasn't so bad at this point. But my mom's like, why aren't you shooting well? So I go to my first varsity game. My dad didn't even go. My dad had gone to every one of my games my whole life. But my dad knew in his mind that I would not be playing varsity. And why? Because my dad knew I wasn't shooting well. So he was like, he wasn't going to my games. And he said something about how he didn't think I was shooting well and he wasn't sure I would be playing varsity that year. So I went to the tryouts for varsity, and then I went to my first varsity game. My dad didn't go because he was pretty sure that they would put me not on varsity that year. But then the first game we had with varsity, I played really well. And then the next game, I played really well. And then the coach put me, after that, he was like, okay, Ryan's not just on varsity, he's a starting point guard on varsity. So that kind of so then my dad hears that I'm the starting point guard on varsity. So then my dad goes to the next game, and my dad's like, yes, this is awesome. But still, at that time, I look at the videos, I'm the starting point guard. I'm a good dribbler. You see, people want to think that, I know my dad wants to think, my mom wants to think there's probably something wrong with me. If there was something wrong with me, wouldn't have there been something wrong with my dribbling too? Wouldn't there have been something wrong with all that stuff? I know I was unconscious. I know that everything was fine with me. I know that the problem was because of the shooting machine was messing up my shot. And I have the videos and I can go into details and I can see exactly what happened. I know exactly what happened. I can see how I was catching the ball after the shooting machine and how I was moving into balls and shots incorrectly. And I know I was moving into shots like I was picking the ball off the shoot away rack. And I know, you see, people think, and I know my grandpa said this too. I'm going to get to my grandpa later, but my grandpa was like, Ryan, if you were in the flow, it wouldn't matter if you were shooting on the shooting machine. If you were in the flow, you still would have been shooting good. He doesn't know. What people don't know is really shooting is like magical. And the reason why I was such a great shooter was it's about the form. It's about how you move into it. And the great shooters move into it the same way. And yeah, practice makes people good. And I think that my grandpa and my dad probably thought like if you just shoot enough, you're going to like your body's going to calculate things well and you're going to be able to shoot the ball into the hole better because you practice all the time. But they don't realize that that's not what makes a good shooter, just practicing all the time. What makes a good shooter is doing the right form and doing it. And the way you do the right form is how you move into the shot. And I did that automatically. You can't really teach it. I did that automatically when I was younger. But now I know like the details of what I did a lot, but you can't really teach that stuff. It just happens automatic. But I know that what happened was once I started picking the ball off a rack, I know I wasn't moving into balls correctly and I wasn't shooting with the correct form as a result. And that's why my shot started getting messed up. So at this point, I'm the starting point guard on varsity. First player in my school's history to do that. And it wasn't just like, oh, well, you must have had a bad team that year. No, we won the CIF championship that year. We were like an amazing team, and we won the CIF championship. I was a starting point guard, but I'm doing well. People, I'm dribbling well. I'm doing all that stuff well. But at the same time, things are not going so good because my shot's really messed up. And it's causing problems. I'm not the same as I was. So I remember like the first game, my mom came to the first game of the season, and I'm the starting point guard on varsity, but I didn't make any of my shots, and I'm not scoring. And my mom after the game, she said I came home and my mom was like, "What the hell is wrong with you?" You see, my mom wasn't like this my whole life. My dad neither. They were always supportive because I was always the best, so there was no problems ever. So they were always supportive. They were great parents. They were always doing things. But at this point, there's problems going on. So my mom was like, what the hell is wrong with you? You're a shooter. You're a scorer. Why aren't you shooting? Why aren't you scoring? And my dad tried to defend me, and he was like, Marla, stop it. He said, he's playing well. Stop it. And my mom was like, no, he's not playing well. He's playing terrible. And I was, though. That's the thing. Like, looking at the videos, I wasn't, but I know that it wasn't me. It was the shoot-away machine, and and the reason why my shot was messed up was because of how I was shooting the ball. And I know that had nothing to do with me. It had to do with the way I was practicing, but they didn't know that. So my mom's like, there must be something wrong with you. And I know that she still is in that headset where she thinks that something was wrong with me. Now, later, I would try to explain to my mom that it was a shoot-away machine. I tried to explain to her when I looked at the videos in college, and my mom said, because I'm going to get into details about this, but my grandpa kind of polluted my mom's mind a little bit too. And I'll get to that. But my mom said, you don't take responsibility for anything. That's what grandpa's big thing, taking responsibility. You don't take responsibility. And she was like, it wasn't because of the shooting machine. It was because you started to become mentally ill at that time. And that's why your shot started getting messed up. And that's why things started getting messed up. It's because you started to become mentally ill. But that's not the case. And I'll get into details about all that. But yeah, so at this point, my mom's like, what's wrong with you? So then my mom said, I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed to go to your games. I'm not going to go to any more of your games because you basically, she's like, you suck now. So my mom, and I think that my mom thought that by getting under me like that, that would make me play better. Because I remember like one time when I was really young, I don't know if I was playing bad or what, but my mom my mom or my dad like yelled at me or something, and that made me play better. So my mom thought, but also she might have just been upset with me, but I think she thought that this would help me by, trying to get under me and trying to like, hey, you're playing like shit, start playing better. But my mom was like, I'm not going to go to any of your games. And she was embarrassed. She's like, because you suck now. Like, I don't want to go to your games because you suck. But I'm the starting point guard on varsity. We won the CIF championship, but my mom didn't go to any of my games after that. And after this, I'm going to talk about how things just deteriorated to beyond belief. And I'll get into that.